Welcome to the Don't Pre-Order series, where we bring you the reminders to think twice before putting down that pre-order money. This is your Kingerd speaking, and today we are going to look at Starfield, a game that's likely going to make some viewers put on their Mr. Potato Head angry eyes. In these videos, I ask you to leave in the comments, what games do you plan on pre-ordering anyway? And then, after they come out, we check to see if they make it in the series. Spoiler alert, Starfield was all over my comments and even inspired some of the most unhinged spewery of toxic sludge ever left on this channel. Before any Starfield fans click away, let me make this loud and clear. I like Starfield. Yes, it's true. I don't love it, but I like it. But a game being good or bad is not the only factor we look at as to whether or not it ends up in this series. For example, you're never gonna see that 2023 King Kong game in a don't pre-order video. Even if you could pre-order that game, I'm really not sure who exactly was sitting around biting into their toenails in anticipation for it. When it comes to Starfield, we're not gonna focus on the bugs, fetch quests, main story being lackluster, stale combat, or even the debate on whether the Bethesda formula is aging like a fine wine or like hot milk. Oh no, the games that show up here usually include instances of studio laziness, greed, or misleading marketing. Which brings us to Starfield. But Starfield got generally good reviews, so why are we talking about it here? Let's pull out the receipts and talk about it. Bethesda, well known for their single-player RPGs like the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series, were used to receiving critical acclaim and had garnered a massive fanbase of players. After Fallout 4's release in 2015, they began work on a new IP. Implementing their tried and true model of skill trees, exploration, and side quests branching into all sorts of narrative experiences, this time they wanted to emphasize science fiction even more than Fallout had. They'd wanted to make an outer space-centered game since the 90s, but now that they had the money and the clout needed for large-scale projects like this, work on Starfield continued over the next 8 years. Player trust in new Bethesda products was shaken, to say the least, after the release of Fallout 76. Despite being primarily developed by their subsidiary Bethesda Austin, Bethesda's director Todd Howard both promoted it and claimed enough involvement in the game's development to still remove a lot of the benefit of the doubt many players had when it came to their new releases. If that weren't enough, Redfall hit the scene in 2023.
What, why are you handing me this? What is this, more trash? Better be a written apology. See this? Oh, this is very nice.
And while developer Arcane Austin and new parent company Microsoft took most flack for its state, Bethesda Softworks was still its publisher, so that's 2 busted games under their belt since Fallout 4. I speak on Fallout 76 and Redfall pretty extensively in previous videos, so for more information there, feel free to go check those out. But if the comments on those videos are any indication, many loyal fans still insisted Bethesda could be trusted with the upcoming game Starfield. After all, it had been in development for almost 8 years. They couldn't possibly botch something that's been coming for that long, right? To further add to the tribalism around Starfield's anticipation, Microsoft acquired Bethesda's parent company ZeniMax, firmly planting the game right in the middle of the console wars. Which is stupid, by the way. Everyone knows the game sphere is superior. The gaming world stood still the day Bethesda hosted Starfield Direct, a deep dive into the game's features and mechanics. It was at this presentation that pieces of the game were advertised, and player expectations about what the game would be were either confirmed or debunked. Starfield Direct promised the Bethesda special, skill trees, character customization, and exploration, but this time with a twist. You could customize and fly your very own spaceship, using it for space battles, space piracy, space exploration, and space booty. I mean, if you're like into romance side quests and stuff.
This is my solemn pledge to you, from deep within my heart, from deep within my soul.
On top of that, there would be around 1,000 planets players could explore in their entirety on foot. Spaceships and space travel appeared to be an integral part to Starfield, being present in pretty much every piece of marketing material for the game. Fans were promised,
that isn't just a backdrop. That moon is actually there orbiting the planet. Yes, you can visit it too.
sounding very similar to Todd Howard's promise about mountains back in the Elder Scrolls days.
That mountain is not just a backdrop. You can walk all the way to the top of that mountain.
Given the type of game that it was and the features that were promised, it was pretty tough not to compare Starfield to No Man's Sky, another game that also had deep space exploration. And look, I know No Man's Sky is a survival exploration game made by an indie studio, but let's stop pretending that means we're not allowed to compare the features the two games share. With Starfield's budget being considerably higher than No Man's Sky, and it being developed by the people who made Skyrim, you know, the game's so popular it's been released 17 times across 10 different platforms, it looked like Starfield should have easily been an improvement on No Man's Sky in every way, with the Bethesda RPG magic mixed in. In an interview, Todd Howard said that although there were a lot of planets, they would not be boring procedural generation. He explained the planets would have their main points of interest, and yes, there would be procedural generation present, but there would absolutely be plenty to do and see, and players would have the freedom to explore anywhere they wanted to on every planet in the game. However, Todd did also mention only about 10% of the planets would contain life on them. I mean, this wasn't a problem on its face. After all, the majority of planets we know of in our galaxy don't have life on them either. But the flip side of this coin meant that around 900 of them would be barren and intended mainly for gathering resources. Whether that's a good or bad game design choice is not what we're going to discuss here in this video. Keep in mind what we've been told though. Space exploration allowing travel to any planet you see, you can explore the entire surface of a planet, and procedural generation that won't be boring. If you've played Starfield, I'm sure you know where this is going. Before release, you could pre-order Starfield in its standard edition for $70, premium edition for $100, which came with access to a future DLC, art book, and soundtrack, or the Constellation edition for $250, which came with all the premium's perks, but also with some more cosmetics and collectibles like a watch, watch case, steelbook case, and cred stick. This Constellation edition is now tied with Cyberpunk 2077's Collector's Edition for most expensive pre-order in this series at a whopping $250. All three of Starfield's pre-order editions came with a set of cosmetics and 5 days of early access. Early access is a topic for another video, which I actually have covered. Like Redfall, Starfield was a game offered on day one on Xbox Game Pass, so if there was already a reason why not to pre-order a game, it being available on a subscription platform right at release just added another. Starfield released in 2023, and unlike other games in this series so far, it was released to generally positive reviews.
A distinction.
Starfield delivered pretty much exactly the Bethesda RPG elements most people expected. Talk to NPC, travel to another point. Pick up object and or talk to another NPC, return to original NPC, get XP for finishing quest. It turns out Xbox Game Studio head Matt Booty, yeah, ha ha ha, laugh it up, get it all out. It turns out he was right about his claims before launch.
If it shipped today, this would be have the fewest bugs that any game from Bethesda has ever shipped with.
However, making the least amount of bugs in a Bethesda game is about as much of an accomplishment as only crashing your car 3 times on your way home from your local Piggly Wiggly. But I digress. I mean, I still lost all of my best gear in this game because of a bug with items disappearing from armory racks when you change ships. And no, I did not notice this had happened till after about 5 hours of gameplay later. Now this did irk me solid, but it didn't ruin my overall experience. I was honestly just impressed the game was playable on day one. When players got their hands on it, the usual debates about Bethesda's formula did ensue. You know, some of it unfairly fueled by the console wars if we're being honest with ourselves, but a lot of it did still have valid points. One side said the main story was boring, the other side said Bethesda RPGs aren't about the main story. One side said there were too many fetch quests and message delivery simulators. The other side pointed out there were still some deeper side quests to discover. Despite all of this, the conversations that proved to be the most divisive about Starfield happened to revolve around its most marketed feature.
We want you to feel like explorers.
Whether you want to explore and see what you can find,
Exploring every inch
We love
of a mostly
exploration
untouched
and
galaxy.
rewarding it.
explore, explore.
That usually involves exploring an area you've landed in.
Word spread on the interwebs during the early access period. Starfield didn't feel like an explorer simulator. It felt like a loading screen simulator.
You're fast traveling everywhere. You don't actually do anything. Fast travel, walk over, cutscene. Fast travel, talk to this person.
Anytime you're doing anything, because you don't really have any reason to explore or actually run there. There's just not a lot of interesting things to do along the way, so why not fast travel?
The point of this game, especially now that I've played a lot more of it, is that it's an RPG and it's about talking to people. It's not really a space exploration game.
Every planet, every point of interest, every city could be fast traveled to from the pause screen. And unlike No Man's Sky, where you could both manually enter and exit the atmosphere of a planet while flying, Starfield forced you to fast travel from orbit to a landing spot and vice versa. When it came to interplanetary travel, it was actually impossible for a player to fly from one planet to another. This took her 7 hours of flying to a distant planet to learn that while planets do technically exist in the space, you fly right through them if you get too close. Starfield forced you to open the fast travel menu even if you had just flown the whole way yourself manually. For a game that emphasizes space travel as much as Starfield does, there's absolutely no reason at all to use or even have a starship for anything but item storage. Why bother upgrading your ship's fuel capacity, which says it lets you travel farther, when the entire game is accessible to you from a fast travel menu? You're not even required to return to your ship to use the fast travel menu. Sure, you have to fly to a galaxy once to unlock it for fast travel, but from that point, it felt like we were looking at a loading screen just as often as we were playing the game. If a side quest takes me to various planets to progress it, the experience shouldn't be 50% talking to lifeless NPCs and 50% looking at a loading screen. These criticisms about Starfield seem to be the opposite of Red Dead 2's criticisms when it came out. At that game's release, people criticized it for having too many immersion mechanics that made gameplay too complex or unnecessarily tedious, like slow body looting or having to be a stud muffin who needs to shave his face regularly, while Starfield was criticized for not being complex enough and too easy for the player to navigate around, which hurt player immersion. Also, unlike No Man's Sky, once you'd landed on a planet, the game contained invisible barriers around the landing area that prompted you to return to your ship and re-land in a different location on the planet if you wanted to explore further. And contrary to Todd Howard's promise that even the planets that were devoid of life would still be interesting, both the generated areas and the points of interest were repetitive. You'd seen pretty much everything there is to see from your landing zone unless you just really wanted to fast travel to a different biome to see one of the game's seemingly infinite types of insectoid creature models that looked and acted almost exactly like the insectoid creature model you've already seen 100 times. In my honest opinion, I think the area it gave you around your landing zone was plenty, and I wouldn't have even found the invisible barriers had I not been specifically looking for them. But stacking this feature up against Bethesda's promise that the whole planet could be explored made it clear. The words they chose while marketing Starfield were handpicked very carefully to both hype players up for the illusion of explorative freedom while tiptoeing around the game's limitations. Again, this isn't a question of is the game bad or
does it even matter if you can't travel that far on foot?
It's a matter of misleading marketing. Todd and Bethesda may not have said an outright lie, but Wonder Woman says it best.
A lie of omission is still a lie.
And I know not everyone here is going to agree on the debate of immersion versus practicality, but the reason Starfield is in this video at all is that rewatching Bethesda's showcases and interviews for this game after actually playing it, it becomes very clear that they knew full well what the game's limitations would be, and maybe intentionally, maybe not, did not do a good job of accurately describing what it would be like playing Starfield. There can't be a person on this earth who heard Todd say,
"That isn't just a backdrop. That moon is actually there orbiting the planet. Yes, you can visit it too."
and correctly assumed that even if they flew all the way to it, it would basically be a moving backdrop unless they fast traveled through a menu to it. And Todd spoke in interviews about the tiles that wrap around planets for the procedural generation, but from what I found, he never mentioned that they would be separated by loading screens into different play areas. I mean, take this and Todd saying that Fallout 3 would have 200 different endings, and we've got ourselves a frontrunner for the king of half-truths. And I hear the argument that maybe people's expectations were just too high, but as a rule of thumb, if you give a speech to a crowd of people and half of them walk away misunderstanding your message, you can do one of two things. Either one, assume half of the people in the room are complete idiots and never bother doing anything to improve on your message delivery or clarity, or two, you can self-reflect and think about ways that you might have been able to convey your message better. Like if half of the audience of this video walked away thinking that I hate Starfield, that means I did not do a good job of explaining that although I think the marketing was misleading, I still enjoy it. Even if you're a die-hard Starfield fan and there's just one thing that you could take away from this video, let it be this. There were two kinds of people who found out about Starfield's limitations. The ones who spent up to $250 for a pre-order, and the ones who found out for free. In the next big game release, the big discrepancy may not be something as simple as exploration limitations. It could be something a lot worse. But what did you think of Starfield? Do you feel like my critique is fair? What games do you still plan on pre-ordering anyway? Let's see if it shows up in this series. If you have any requests, leave them in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching. Kingerd out.